This story is titled, When My Parents Decided to Steal My Workspace Without Warning, I Silently Cleared It Out, found a new apartment the next day without telling them, and now my phone is blowing up with 67 missed calls from them, begging for financial help. Hey Reddit, I'm 28 years old and currently living at home after completing my graphic design degree. I didn't initially plan on moving back in with my parents, but the rent in Chicago is absolutely ridiculous, especially for someone just starting their career. So instead, I've been building my freelance business from our converted garage, which my dad helped me transform into a functional office space about 3 years ago. The past year has been intense, to say the least. I've been working insane hours. We're talking 65 plus hours a week, trying to grow my client list and build a portfolio impressive enough to eventually support a move into my own place. Despite living at home, I'm not getting a free ride. I pay $950 in monthly rent to my parents, plus utilities, and I cover most of the grocery bills. It's still significantly cheaper than trying to rent my own apartment in the city, and the arrangement has worked well, until recently. Last Tuesday, I was having dinner with my family, enjoying a perfectly cooked steak, when my dad casually dropped a bomb that made my stomach twist into a knot. "We're taking your office space," he announced, not as a question or a discussion, but as a statement of fact, like he was simply commenting on the weather. I forced the fakest smile in human history and replied, "Fine, whatever. I'll clear it out tomorrow." But in my head, I was screaming, "Are you fucking serious with this again?" My younger brother Tommy, the golden child of the family at 20 years old, sat across from me with a smug grin. He's failed out of community college twice now, but somehow my parents still think he walks on water. Apparently, he wants my workspace for his streaming career. Currently, he plays Valorant, rather poorly, I might add, for an audience of maybe 14 viewers on a good day. "Tommy needs the space for his equipment," my mom chimed in without even looking up from her phone. "His followers are really growing, and this could be his big break." Yeah, all 42 of them. Meanwhile, I had just landed a $6,000 contract last month, which helped pay for their new water heater when it died during Thanksgiving. Did I receive a single thank you? Of course not. Dad continued stuffing his face with mashed potatoes while explaining, "Your brother needs privacy. The living room isn't cutting it anymore." Privacy for Tommy, the kid who hasn't contributed a single dollar to this household since the day he was born. Meanwhile, I've been the one replacing the roof tiles last summer when they started leaking. I fixed Mom's car when it broke down on her way to work. I even upgraded the home network when Dad kept complaining about his Netflix buffering. In total, I've dumped at least $10,000 into this house over the past year alone, but they still treat me like some random tenant they're doing a favor by letting stay here. The whole time my dad was explaining why Tommy deserved my workspace, my brother just kept grinning wider, like he'd won something significant. But that's how it's always been between us. Him taking, me giving. This dynamic has been established since we were kids. He was always the special one who needed extra help, extra attention, extra everything. When I made honor roll in high school, my parents just nodded as if it was expected. But when Tommy passed a class with a C, they took him out for ice cream to celebrate this momentous achievement. The double standard has never been subtle. I stabbed at my potatoes with more force than necessary, causing ketchup to splatter on the tablecloth. Mom frowned at the mess, but honestly, I was too pissed to care. The garage was my space, my sanctuary from their constant bullshit. But clearly, in this household, I wasn't even entitled to that much. "You can set up in the basement," Dad offered, as if he was being incredibly generous. The basement, with its half-finished walls, concrete floor, and that persistent mildew smell that never quite goes away, where the Wi-Fi signal barely reaches, where the ceiling is so low I have to hunch over just to walk around, where they store all their crap that they can't bear to throw away, but don't actually use. That was apparently supposed to be my new office space. I just nodded because what else could I do? I've spent my whole life being the reasonable one while they catered to Tommy's every whim. That night, I sat in my garage office, staring at the setup I'd built with my own hands and money. The custom desk I had lovingly crafted from reclaimed wood. The perfect cable management system I'd installed that kept everything organized and accessible. The sound absorption panels I'd purchased and mounted to improve the audio quality for client calls. 3 years of building my space, my business, methodically creating the perfect environment for my work. And they were giving it to a teenager who couldn't even wash his own dishes. Something inside me just snapped. I should probably back up and explain the Tommy situation a bit more thoroughly. It's key to understanding why this desk thing hit me so hard. From day one, this kid has been treated like he's made of glass, fragile and requiring special handling. When we were growing up, if I got a B+ on a test, Dad would ask why it wasn't an A. If Tommy got a C, they'd celebrate like he'd won a Nobel Prize. He's just wired differently, Mom would always say. He needs more support. Meanwhile, I was the responsible one who had his shit together, which essentially translated to being the kid they didn't have to worry about. So they didn't. When I was 16, I saved for 6 months to buy my first laptop, working weekends at a local grocery store, skipping movies with friends, and putting aside every birthday and holiday dollar. Meanwhile, Tommy got the newest iPhone for his 12th birthday simply because all his friends had one. I don't think I need to point out that none of his friends actually had the latest model. My parents just couldn't say no to him. I busted my ass for a scholarship to state college, spending countless late nights studying while maintaining extracurriculars that would look good on applications. Tommy, on the other hand, flunked out of community college. Instead of holding him accountable, my parents blamed his professors for not understanding his learning style. They even paid for him to try again at a different school, which, unsurprisingly, he also flunked out of. Not once did they consider that maybe, just maybe, Tommy wasn't putting in the effort. When I moved back home after graduation, the deal was straightforward. I'd pay rent and stay until I got established in my career. That seemed reasonable to me. But somehow, along the way, I also became the in-house tech support, handyman, and emergency fund for the entire family. Last year, during the coldest week of January, the furnace died completely. The repair bill came to $3,200. Guess whose savings paid for it? Not my parents, who both work decent jobs. Definitely not Tommy, who is perpetually between opportunities. No, that money came from me, with the vague promise they'd pay me back soon. I'm still waiting on that. 3 months ago, Dad's car needed a new transmission. That was another $2,100 pulled directly from my client funds. Last summer, I spent 2 full weeks replacing the deck that was rotting through. Not only did I pay for all the materials, but I also did all the labor myself while Tommy played video games inside, unbothered by the scorching heat or the fact that his brother was working his ass off. When they later had friends over to see the new deck, Dad joked, "Yeah, got it done for cheap." He never once mentioned that I had built the damn thing entirely by myself, or that I had funded the project. Every time I try to bring this stuff up, Mom gets teary-eyed and Dad gets defensive. "Family helps family," he'll say with a stern look, as if I'm being unreasonable for wanting some acknowledgement or reciprocity. But it only ever seems to go one direction in this household. So yeah, the garage workspace meant a lot more to me than just a place to put my computer. It was the one place in this house that was truly mine. The space where I had built something from nothing, where I could close the door and escape the constant feeling of being taken for granted. And now, they were handing it to Tommy because his streaming career might take off someday. Right, that night I couldn't sleep. I just lay there in bed, cataloging every time they'd chosen him over me, every time they'd taken from me to give to him, every time I'd swallowed my anger and played along with the family narrative that Tommy needed special treatment. Not anymore. The next morning, I skipped the usual family breakfast. I couldn't stand to look at Tommy's smug face or listen to Mom talk about how they were planning to redecorate my workspace for him. Instead, I sat in my car in the driveway, scrolling through apartment listings on my phone. I'd been saving for my own place for a while now, but with Chicago's insane rental market, I figured I needed at least another year of aggressive saving before I could comfortably make the move. But at that moment, sitting in my car while my family discussed how to repurpose my space without me, I decided, fuck it. I'd live on ramen if I had to. After some searching, I found a studio in Wicker Park, 525 square feet with a dated kitchen. But it had a decent-sized alcove that would be perfect for my desk setup. The rent was $1,950 a month, which was actually below market for anything not actively on fire in that neighborhood. The landlord wanted first and last month's rent plus a security deposit, $5,850 up front. I had $9,400 saved, so it would be tight but doable. I fired off an email to the landlord with my credit score and income verification from my business. I got a response within an hour. "Available now. Can you come see it this afternoon?" Hell yes, I could. The place was exactly as advertised, small and slightly worn around the edges, but clean. It had big windows that let in plenty of natural light, and most importantly, there was no mildew smell, no Tommy, and no parents acting like every dollar I earned belonged to some communal family fund that somehow always got spent on whatever Tommy wanted. "I'll take it," I told the landlord, a chill older lady named Patricia, who mentioned she preferred renting to quiet professionals over party kids. I signed the paperwork on the spot, paid the deposit, and got the keys. Holy shit, just like that, I had my escape plan. Driving home, I felt this weird mix of triumph and fury. I should have done this years ago instead of bankrolling a family that saw me as nothing but a resource to exploit. Well, resources can dry up. I didn't tell them about the apartment. Instead, when Mom texted asking if I could pick up groceries on the way home, I wrote back sure, like nothing had changed. But I didn't buy the usual $250 worth of groceries. Just milk and bread, the bare minimum. "Where's the rest?" she asked when I walked in with one sad little bag. "Budget's tight this month," I said, shrugging casually. "Figured we could all chip in." The look on her face was priceless. Like I'd suggested we start eating the furniture or something equally outrageous. "But you always get the groceries on Tuesdays," she said, clearly perplexed by this deviation from the norm. "Yeah, well, things change," I replied, heading upstairs. Dad was in the garage, my garage, measuring for Tommy's new streaming desk. They were planning to buy a $700 gaming setup for him. Somehow, they'd magically find money for that, despite claiming poverty, whenever I mentioned the $5,200 they still owed me. "Hey, the printer's jammed again," he called out when he saw me walk by. "Can you take a look?" Normally, I'd drop everything to fix it, probably spend 20 minutes of my life extracting whatever paper Tommy had crammed in there wrong. Not today. "Can't," I said flatly. "Client deadline. Can it wait?" "Your mother needs to print some work stuff," he pressed, clearly expecting me to cave as usual. "Nope. Bills to pay." I walked past him to my soon-to-be ex-office and started casually sorting through my things. Not obviously packing, just taking inventory. That night, the printer remained jammed. Mom had to go to FedEx to print her documents, and Dad grumbled about family responsibilities. I just worked on my laptop with my wireless headphones on, a small smile playing at my lips as I ignored the chaos around me. The next day, Tommy cornered me in the kitchen while I was making my morning coffee. "Dude, can you drive me to Kyle's? My car is making that noise again," he asked, already assuming I'd say yes. His car, actually my old Honda that I'd fixed up and stupidly sold to him for half its value when he got his license. A car he hadn't maintained once since taking ownership of it. "Take the bus," I said, not looking up from my coffee. Tommy looked at me like I'd suggested he walk barefoot across broken glass. "The bus? It's like 6 miles. "Sounds like a personal problem," I replied, sipping my coffee. He stormed off to whine to Mom as expected. 10 minutes later, she appeared in the kitchen with that disappointed look she'd perfected over the years. "Jackson, your brother needs a ride. It would only take 20 minutes, she said, clearly expecting me to cave. "I've got work," I responded flatly. "You're just sitting there drinking coffee," she pointed out. "Yeah, on my break from work. That pays my bills, and yours, apparently." I didn't bother hiding the edge in my voice anymore. Her mouth opened then closed again. She wasn't used to pushback from me. These were small rebellions, but man, they felt good after years of compliance. By day 3 of Operation Take Back My Life, cracks were starting to show in the family system. The lawn, which I'd mowed every Sunday since high school, was getting shaggy. The dishes were piling up in the sink because I wasn't loading the dishwasher without being asked anymore. The Wi-Fi kept dropping because I hadn't reset the router in the usual spots where it got glitchy. Little things that they'd taken for granted I would handle were suddenly becoming issues. Dad finally approached me Thursday night, awkwardly hovering in my doorway like he wasn't quite sure how to start the conversation. "So the lawn's getting kind of out of control," he said, trying to sound casual. I glanced up from my laptop. "Yep, sure is. I figured you were going to mow it last weekend," he continued. "Nah," I replied, looking back at my screen. A long pause followed before he asked, "Are you going to mow it this weekend?" "Wasn't planning on it," I said without looking up. He shifted uncomfortably in the doorway. "Is something wrong, Jackson? You seem off lately. That was rich." After 3 years of using me as their personal handyman, ATM, and emotional support human, he was finally noticing something was off. "Just busy with work," I said blandly. "Well, we're family. We all need to pitch in," he reminded me, his tone carrying a hint of reproach. I finally looked up at him, letting his words hang in the air between us. We all need to pitch in. When was the last time Tommy had pitched in with anything? When had Dad last fixed something instead of waiting for me to do it? Sure, I said finally. I'll add it to the list. I didn't specify what list, but I was definitely keeping score. The next morning, I woke up to raised voices downstairs. Curious, I peeked over the banister to see Tommy and Dad arguing about the yard. Why do I have to do it? That's Jackson's job, Tommy protested, his voice rising in pitch as it always did when he was being asked to do something he didn't want to do. Your brother's busy. Just do it this once, Dad replied, sounding exhausted already even though it was barely 9 a.m. But I have a stream scheduled. My followers are expecting me, Tommy whined. All 42 of them, I thought to myself with a smirk. Then reschedule it. Jesus Christ, Tommy, it's just lawn mowing, Dad snapped, his patience clearly wearing thin. It was like watching a nature documentary, the parasitic relationship disturbed, the host organism finally pushing back against the parasite. Fascinating to observe from a distance. I slipped back to my room and started packing another box. I'd been slowly moving my valuables out each day while they were busy arguing about chores. My new studio apartment was gradually filling up with my stuff, but the family was too caught up in their own drama to notice anything missing. But the real bombshell dropped that afternoon. I was on a client call when Dad knocked on my door. When I finished, I opened it to find his face wearing a weird mix of defensiveness and guilt. Hey, quick thing, he said, not quite meeting my eyes. I sold your workbench. Guy's picking it up tomorrow. Got $350 for it. My custom workbench, the one I'd built from scratch, with the perfect height for my ergonomic setup, the built-in cable management, the adjustable monitor arms, all gone without even a conversation. You sold my property without asking me? My voice was dangerously calm. Well, Tommy needs a proper streaming desk, and since you're moving to the basement anyway, he trailed off, sensing my building anger. So you just decided my stuff was yours to sell? It wasn't a question. He had the grace to look embarrassed. I figured you'd be fine with it. It's for your brother's career. His career, I repeated flatly. Right. Dad shifted uncomfortably. Look, we'll split it with you. You can have $120, a third of the money for my bench. That I built with my own hands and my own money. The absolute audacity of it all. Keep it, I said, turning back to my computer. Consider it my investment in the bank of Tommy. Seems to be the only place my money goes around here anyway. He left confused but relieved I hadn't pushed back harder. As soon as the door closed, I booked a U-Haul for Saturday morning. Enough was enough. By Friday, I'd moved about 70% of my belongings to the new apartment. Nothing obvious. The TV was still in place. The bed still made. But clothes, important documents, and my good computing equipment had all been quietly relocated while they went about their days, oblivious to what was happening right under their noses. The family dynamic was deteriorating fast. Tommy had half-assed the lawn, leaving patches uncut and the edges looking like hell. Dad had attempted to fix the printer, only to break it worse than before. Mom was getting increasingly snippy about the state of the house. I moved through it all like a ghost, doing the bare minimum to avoid suspicion. I made my own meals, cleaned only my own dishes, and when the internet went down for the third time that week and Mom called out, "Jackson, the Wi-Fi is acting up again," I just called back, "Try unplugging it." Small satisfactions. Friday night, Dad cornered me again in the hallway. "Look, about your workbench. If you really want to keep it, I can call the guy back," he offered, clearly having second thoughts about selling my property without permission. "Too little, too late, don't bother," I replied coldly. "Tommy's pretty excited about setting up the garage. Maybe you could help him get everything arranged this weekend? You know, make it a brother thing," he suggested, trying to smooth things over. I almost laughed in his face. A brother thing? After they'd taken my space, tried to sell my property, and treated me like the help for years? The audacity was breathtaking. "I've got plans," I said, attempting to move past him. "What plans?" he pressed, clearly confused by my sudden unavailability. "My plans," I responded, not elaborating further as I brushed past him and headed to my room to pack the last essentials. He followed me up, hovering anxiously in my doorway. "Jackson, what's going on with you lately? Your mother's worried." Of course, it wasn't "I'm worried," but "your mother's worried." Classic dad deflection, never admitting his own concern, always pushing it onto someone else. "Nothing's going on," I said, keeping my tone carefully neutral. "Just establishing some boundaries." "Boundaries? We're family," he replied, as if that magic word was supposed to excuse everything. And there it was. The get-out-of-jail-free card they played whenever they wanted something from me. Family. The word that somehow meant I should give everything while expecting nothing in return. Yes, I agreed. We are family. Which is why it's interesting that when Tommy wants something, it's we need to support each other. But when I need something, it's you're an adult. Figure it out. Dad's face flushed with a mix of anger and embarrassment. That's not fair. We've supported you plenty. Name one time in the last year you've helped me with anything. One time you've put my needs first, I challenged him. He opened his mouth, then closed it, then tried again. We let you live here, don't we? I pay rent. $950 a month plus utilities plus groceries half the time, I reminded him. Plus every emergency repair in this house. I'm not living here, Dad. I'm subsidizing all of you. That's ridiculous. You're twisting things, he protested. But there was a hint of uncertainty in his voice now. Am I? How much have I spent fixing this place up in the last year? The furnace, the deck, your transmission, over $9,000, I said, finally laying it all out. How much has Tommy contributed? Ever? He didn't have an answer for that. And now you're taking my workspace, the one place in this house that's actually mine, and giving it to him. Then selling my property without asking, I continued, my voice steady despite the anger I felt. So tell me again how this is a two-way street. Dad's expression cycled through anger and defensiveness before settling on uncomfortable realization. We didn't think... No, I cut him off. You didn't. I turned back to my closet and started pulling out the last of my clothes, not bothering to hide what I was doing anymore. What are you doing? Dad asked, his voice suddenly uncertain. Packing. For what? I stopped and looked him dead in the eye. I'm moving out tomorrow. The shock on his face would have been comical if it wasn't so pathetic. Moving out? Where? Why didn't you tell us? Signed a lease last week, and I'm telling you now, I replied matter-of-factly. But the basement, we figured, he stammered, trying to process this unexpected development. That I'd keep bankrolling this household while you guys kept taking? Yeah, that was the plan, wasn't it? I finished for him. He didn't deny it, which told me everything I needed to know. Jackson, let's talk about this. Your mother will be upset, he tried, falling back on guilt as a last resort. I'm sure she will be. The ATM is leaving, I said, turning back to my packing. He left my room shell-shocked. I heard the murmur of urgent voices downstairs as he presumably broke the news to Mom and Tommy. I kept packing, methodical and calm. The storm was coming, and for once, I wasn't going to be the one cleaning up after it. Saturday morning arrived with a sense of finality. I had the U-Haul parked conspicuously in the driveway and was carrying out the last of my boxes while my family watched in various states of distress. Mom was crying, of course. It was her go-to manipulation tactic whenever things weren't going her way. I don't understand why you're doing this, she sniffled. Why not talk to us first? Like you talked to me before deciding to take my workspace? I countered, not breaking rhythm as I continued loading boxes. That's different. Tommy needed, she started. Tommy always needs. Tommy always gets, I interrupted. I'm just finally taking myself out of the equation. Dad was alternating between anger and bargaining, unable to settle on a consistent approach. This is childish, Jackson. Running away because you didn't get your way, he said accusingly. Not running away, I corrected him, hefting my computer tower into the truck. Moving on, there's a difference. Tommy was sulking on the porch, looking lost and confused. His future streaming career suddenly seemed in jeopardy without me there to set up his equipment and troubleshoot his technical problems. What about my desk? He whined. Dad already sold yours. Sounds like a you problem, I replied, echoing his own favorite phrase back at him with a satisfaction that ran bone deep. Mom followed me back into the house, still sniffling as if her tears could somehow change my mind. I just don't understand where this is coming from. We're family. I stopped, set down the box I was carrying, and faced her directly. Let me make it crystal clear then. I walked to the kitchen, grabbed a marker from the drawer, and pulled a piece of paper from the printer they still hadn't fixed. In large letters, I wrote out exactly what they needed to see. Jackson's contributions. Last 12 months rent paid. $11,400 utilities approximately. $2,100 groceries approximately. $5,200. Furnace repair. $3,200 dad's transmission. $2,100 deck rebuild. $1,300 plus 80 hours labor. Regular home maintenance. $2,800 approximately tech support. Countless hours total. $28,100 plus. 28. Tommy's contributions. Zero attitude, priceless. I stuck it to the fridge with a magnet, making sure it was prominently displayed. That's where this is coming from. Mom stared at the list, her tears suddenly drying up as the numbers registered. It hasn't been that much, she said weakly. Check my bank statements. I kept records, I replied calmly. Dad had wandered in and was reading over her shoulder, his face draining of color as he took in the total amount. The furnace wasn't that expensive, he protested, but his voice lacked conviction. $3,200. I have the receipt, I informed him. You said you'd pay me back when things ease up. That was 11 months ago. They exchanged uncomfortable glances, realizing they'd been caught in their own web of excuses. We've been meaning to, Mom started. Save it, I cut her off. I don't even care about the money anymore. What I care about is that I've been keeping this household afloat for years, and you still treat me like I'm the selfish one when I need something. You still put Tommy first every time, even though he contributes nothing. He's younger, Dad tried, falling back on the same tired excuse. He's still finding his way. He's 20, I pointed out. I was working 2 jobs at 20, paying for my own car, my own phone, my own everything. That's because you were more responsible, Mom replied, her voice trailing off as she realized what she was admitting. Right, I was responsible, so you burdened me with everything, I said, driving the point home. He's irresponsible, so you burdened him with nothing. And now you're genuinely shocked that I'm leaving. I picked up my box again, ready to continue the move. Jackson, wait, Dad said, his voice no longer angry but genuinely alarmed. Let's figure this out. We can make this right. Too late. I signed a lease, paid the deposit. My name's off the utilities here as of Monday, I informed them, dropping another bombshell. That landed like a nuclear explosion in the middle of their comfortable world. What do you mean your name's off the utilities? Mom asked, panic edging into her voice. I mean, I've been paying the internet, the streaming services, and half the power bill, I explained. I called yesterday and had everything transferred or canceled. You've got about 48 hours to figure out new arrangements. Tommy appeared in the doorway, finally catching on that his comfortable life was about to change dramatically. The realization was dawning on his face that the consequences of my departure extended far beyond just losing his tech support guy. You can't just leave, he protested, his voice rising slightly in panic. Who's going to fix the printer or the Wi-Fi when it goes down? I couldn't help but laugh at his priorities. That's your first concern? Not how will we pay the bills, but who's going to fix my shit for free? I brushed past him and carried the box to the truck. Mom followed me out, now in full panic mode as the reality of the situation sank in. Jackson, please, she begged. We didn't realize how much you were doing. We can work something out. Your father and I will pay you back. With what money? I asked bluntly. You guys live paycheck to paycheck. You barely have savings. We'll figure it out, she insisted. Please just don't do this. I closed the U-Haul's rear door and locked it with a sense of finality. I've already done it. I'm not asking for the money back. I'm not even asking for an apology, though that would have been nice. I'm just done being the family ATM. But what about Tommy? She asked, and I almost admired her dedication to keeping him at the center of everything, even now. What about him? I replied coolly. He's an adult. Let him get a job. He can't find anything in his field, she argued. His field? I repeated incredulously. He's a college dropout who plays video games badly on the internet. That's not a field. It was harsh but true and long overdue. Mom's face crumpled at my bluntness, but I couldn't find it in me to care anymore. Years of frustration were finally being released. Dad had stormed back inside after our earlier confrontation, but now he reappeared with his wallet in hand. He pulled out 5 $20 bills, his standard emergency cash stash, and thrust them at me. Here, he said, extending the money toward me. For the furnace. It's a start. I looked at the money, then back at him, almost feeling sorry for how desperate and pathetic this gesture was. Keep it. You're going to need it. I climbed into the U-Haul, ready to drive away from this chapter of my life. Mom was openly sobbing now. Dad looked shell-shocked, and Tommy was furiously texting someone, probably complaining about his terrible family and how unfair everything was. I'll call you when I'm settled, I told them, as I started the engine, which was more courtesy than they deserved after everything. As I pulled away, I glanced in the side mirror. They stood in the driveway looking lost and bewildered, like children suddenly abandoned at a shopping mall. For the first time in their adult lives, they were going to have to solve their own problems without me as their safety net. The thought gave me a satisfaction I couldn't quite put into words. The first week in my new place was absolute bliss. No one barging in asking for tech support. No family dinner guilt trips. No expectation that I'd drop everything to shuttle Tommy around. Just me, my reclaimed workspace set up exactly how I wanted it, and the glorious silence of a space that was 100% mine. I got a text from Mom the day after I left. "The internet's not working. Did you really cancel it?" I didn't respond. Let them figure it out. 3 days later, I received a call from Dad. "The hot water heater is making a noise," he said, concern evident in his voice. "YouTube has lots of DIY videos," I suggested cheerfully and hung up. By the end of the week, the texts were coming hourly. The printer still wasn't working. The yard was becoming a jungle. None of them knew how to reset the router properly. The streaming services were gone. Tommy's career was stalled because he couldn't figure out how to set up his equipment properly. "Can you just come over for an hour?" Mom pleaded in her latest message. "We'll pay you. My contractor rate is $110 an hour, 2-hour minimum, payment up front," I replied. That shut her up for a while. But the following Tuesday, exactly 10 days after I moved out, the real crisis hit. I got a panicked call from Dad at 8 a.m. "The furnace quit again," he announced, his voice tight with stress. "The house is freezing." It was mid-February with temperatures in the 20s at night. Chicago winters don't mess around. "Call the HVAC company," I suggested reasonably. "They want $240 just to come out, plus parts and labor," he complained. "Welcome to home ownership," I replied, unable to keep the satisfaction from my voice. "Jackson, please," he practically begged. "We don't have that kind of money right now." Of course they didn't. They'd been counting on me to handle all home maintenance issues for so long that they hadn't bothered to build any sort of emergency fund. "What about the emergency fund?" I asked, knowing full well there wasn't one. "Your mother had to use it for groceries," he admitted reluctantly. Translation: they'd been living beyond their means for years using me as the safety net, and now that net was gone. "That sounds serious," I said, trying to keep the satisfaction from my voice. "Maybe Tommy can contribute from his streaming income." The silence on the other end was delicious. That's not really," Dad fumbled for words. "Not really bringing in money yet." "Shocking," I replied dryly. I let him stew for a moment, then sighed dramatically. "Text me the exact error code on the furnace display. I'll see if it's something simple." It wasn't, of course. The igniter had failed. A $110 part plus labor. But I knew it wasn't something they could fix themselves without risking bigger problems with the system. "You've got 2 options," I told Dad after researching it. "Pay the HVAC company or replace the igniter yourself and risk damaging the control board, which would be another $750 repair." "Can't you just come look at it?" he almost begged. "I'm in the middle of a client project with a deadline," I said, which was true. "But tell you what, if you and Tommy want to come by tonight, I'll walk you through ordering the part and show you some YouTube tutorials on how to replace it." There was a long pause as Dad considered whether his pride was worth suffering in a cold house. "What time?" he finally asked. 7 p.m. and Dad, bring Tommy. He should learn this stuff if he's going to keep living there." That night, they both showed up at my door looking uncomfortable. It was the first time they'd seen my new place, and they both seemed surprised by how nice it was. "It's nice," Dad offered, looking around at my perfectly arranged studio. My desk, not the one they'd sold but a new one I'd found on Craigslist and refinished, took pride of place by the window, bathed in natural light. "Thanks," I responded, not inviting them to sit. "Let's talk furnace." I pulled up the manual for their unit on my laptop, showed them exactly which part they needed, where to order it, and how to install it. "I don't think I can do this," Dad admitted, staring at the diagram with a mix of confusion and apprehension. "I definitely can't," Tommy added, not even bothering to hide his lack of interest in learning basic home maintenance. "Then you'll need to call the HVAC company," I stated matter-of-factly. "Jackson, please," Dad tried one more time, his desperation evident. "We really don't have the money right now. Couldn't you just—" "No," I said firmly. "I couldn't." "But we're FA. If you say family, I'm going to close this door right now," I warned him, cutting him off. "Family goes both ways, and for years it's only gone one way with us." He swallowed whatever he was going to say, finally seeming to understand that the old tactics wouldn't work anymore. "Look," I softened slightly, seeing genuine distress in his expression. "I'll make you a deal. I'll come fix the furnace this one time. But in exchange, we're going to have a serious family meeting about finances and responsibilities. All cards on the table. And Tommy starts contributing. Real contributions, not promises. Dad looked relieved. Deal, absolutely. Tommy frowned, clearly unhappy with this turn of events. What do you mean, contributing? I mean, you get a job. A real one with a paycheck, I explained bluntly. You pay rent. You do chores without being nagged. You learn how to fix basic household stuff so it doesn't all fall on Dad now that I'm gone. But my streaming is, he started to protest. A hobby, not a career. Not yet anyway, I interrupted. You can stream on your days off just like any other hobby. He looked like he wanted to argue further, but Dad shot him a warning look that silenced him. Fine, Tommy muttered, sulking like the overgrown child he was. The next day I went over and fixed their furnace. It took about an hour start to finish, working methodically while Dad watched over my shoulder, trying to understand what I was doing. Tommy, predictably, was nowhere to be found during the actual work. Once warm air was flowing through the vents again, I called a family meeting at the kitchen table. It was time for some uncomfortable truths. I laid it all out for them. Their actual expenses versus income. The reality of what it would cost to replace all the services I'd been providing for free, and a proposed budget going forward. I even included a line item for $300 per month rent from Tommy. That's not fair, he protested immediately when he saw the number. I don't have any money. That's why you'll get a job, I explained, like I was talking to a toddler. Starbucks is hiring. So is Walmart. So is every warehouse in the area. Those aren't real jobs, he scoffed. They pay real money. Money you need, I replied simply. Mom looked teary again, falling back on her usual tactic. Jackson, he's not like you. He struggles with... With what exactly? I interrupted. He's not disabled. He's not sick. He's a perfectly healthy 20-year-old who's been allowed to coast because it was easier than holding him accountable. Dad, surprisingly, backed me up. Your brother's right, Tommy. Things need to change around here. The look of betrayal on Tommy's face was priceless. He wasn't used to Dad taking anyone's side but his. This is bullshit, he declared, standing up dramatically. I'm not getting some lame-ass job just because Jackson decided to be a dick about money. Yes, you are, Dad said, his voice firmer than I'd heard it in years. Or you're finding somewhere else to live. Holy shit. Actual parenting happening before my eyes. I had to stop myself from applauding. Tommy stormed out, slamming his door like the adult he definitely wasn't. He'll calm down, Mom said, but she sounded uncertain. And if he doesn't? I asked pointedly. Dad sighed heavily. Then he really will have to figure something else out. We can't keep going like this. I hadn't expected that level of resolution from him. Maybe, just maybe, they were finally getting it. What about you? I asked, turning to address both of them. I meant what I said about all cards on the table. I've been subsidizing this household for years. That stops now. They looked at each other, then nodded slowly. We'll figure it out, Dad said with resignation in his voice. Get on a budget, maybe pick up some extra shifts. Good, I said, standing up. I'll check in next week to see how it's going. As I headed for the door, Mom called after me. Will you come for dinner sometimes? Not to fix things, just to visit? I paused, considering her request. Maybe. Once you guys get your house in order, literally and figuratively. 3 weeks later, Tommy got a job at a warehouse. It was entry-level, but offered decent pay. The look on his face the first time he had to hand over rent money to Dad was something I'll treasure forever. A mixture of resentment and dawning realization that the free ride was truly over. Dad dug out his old tools and started learning basic home repairs from YouTube videos. I caught him watching tutorials on his phone during my occasional visits. Determination etched on his face as he struggled to understand concepts that had always been my department. Mom set up a real budget and stuck to it. She canceled unnecessary subscriptions, started using coupons, and even began cooking at home more often instead of ordering takeout several times a week. They even started paying me back for the furnace, small amounts but regular payments. It wasn't so much about the money as it was about the acknowledgement of what they owed me, both financially and emotionally. And me? I was killing it at my new place. My business was booming now that I didn't have family drama eating up my mental bandwidth. I had established firm boundaries. I had peace and quiet. I had that deeply satisfying feeling that comes from watching people finally face reality after years of avoidance. I still went over for dinner occasionally, but now when something broke, I didn't automatically jump up to fix it. Instead, I watched as Dad and Tommy figured it out together, sometimes offering guidance but never taking over. It was a strange role reversal, but a necessary one. It took burning it all down to build something better, and I don't regret it for a second. Final update. It's been half a year since I moved out and forced my family to face reality, and the transformation is actually kind of shocking. Last weekend, I stopped by for the monthly family dinner we've established on my terms, where I'm a guest, not the household ATM repairman. I noticed immediately that things were different. The lawn was actually mowed. The kitchen sink wasn't piled with dishes. And most surprisingly, Tommy wasn't glued to his gaming setup. Turns out the golden child learned some harsh lessons these past months. His streaming career hit a wall fast once he had to balance it with his warehouse job. No more 12-hour gaming marathons when you've got an 8-hour shift moving boxes. According to Mom, he bitched about it constantly at first, complaining that the job was ruining his chance at internet fame. But something unexpected happened. He got promoted to shift lead last week, Dad told me proudly over pot roast dinner. Youngest one they've ever had in that position, he announced, genuine pride evident in his voice. Tommy actually looked embarrassed by the praise, which was new and refreshing. The old Tommy would have preened and acted entitled to the recognition. It's not a big deal, he said, shrugging it off. Just means more responsibility for barely more money. Welcome to adulthood, I replied, but without the bite I would have had before. The real shocker came after dinner when the dishwasher made a weird grinding noise mid-cycle. Damn it, Dad muttered under his breath. Then, instead of looking at me expectantly as he would have done in the past, he turned to Tommy. Can you take a look at that tomorrow? Probably just something caught in the filter, he asked casually. And Tommy just nodded, like this was normal, like he'd been handling household maintenance all along. He's gotten pretty good with basic repairs, Mom explained, seeing my surprised expression. After you left and the toilet broke for the third time, he finally took initiative. YouTube tutorials, Tommy shrugged. Same ones you used to watch. I almost fell out of my chair. This was not the entitled brat I'd grown up with. Later, Dad walked me out to my car. He awkwardly handed me an envelope, avoiding eye contact as if embarrassed. Inside was $600 cash. It's not everything we owe you, he said quickly. But we've been putting aside a little each month. Figured we'd start making real payments, not just token ones. I was genuinely speechless. For years, money had only flowed one direction in this family, from my pocket to theirs. This reversal felt alien but welcome. Thanks, I finally managed. I appreciate it. We should have done better by you, Dad said, staring at his shoes. I didn't realize how much we were taking advantage until you weren't there to take advantage of anymore. It's not an excuse, but I'm sorry. Again, words I never thought I'd hear from him. Tommy's different too, he continued. Having real responsibilities, earning his own money, it's been good for him. Made him grow up. Better late than never, I said, but without rancor. Yeah, Dad hesitated, then asked, You doing okay? Place working out? Better than okay, I told him truthfully. Business has doubled since I moved. Turns out not having my resources drained constantly lets me focus on actually building something. He winced slightly but nodded, accepting the truth of my words. You deserved better from us. As I drove home, I realized something had shifted fundamentally. My family hadn't just adjusted to my absence, they'd actually grown from it. Tommy was developing into a functioning adult. My parents were taking responsibility for their finances. And most importantly, they were finally acknowledging what they'd done. Obligatory disclaimer. I know some of you will say I should have cut contact completely. Trust me, I considered it. But despite everything, they're still my family. I'm not saying everyone should reconcile with toxic family members. Some families are truly beyond repair. But in my case, once they showed actual change and remorse, I decided a controlled relationship was worth trying. Your mileage may vary. The following week, I got a text from Tommy that nearly made me crash my car. Hey, got a bonus at work. Wanted to pay you back for the workbench Dad sold. It was a dick move. Let me know your Venmo. I'm not making this up. I literally had to pull over because I thought I was hallucinating or someone had stolen his phone. I actually checked if I was having a stroke. The golden child acknowledging a wrong and offering to make it right without being forced? This was unprecedented territory. I sent him my Venmo info, half expecting nothing to come of it. 10 minutes later, $350 hit my account with the note, For the workbench. Sorry it took so long. It wasn't just about the money. It was the recognition. The acknowledgement that what had happened wasn't okay. That my feelings and my property actually mattered. That weekend, something even weirder happened. Tommy called me, not texted, actually called, and asked if I'd help him set up a basic budget spreadsheet. The warehouse is offering a 401k match, and I don't know about investing, but I figure I should start, he explained, sounding genuinely interested in planning for his future. I invited him over, somewhat skeptical but willing to see if this new version of Tommy was legitimate. To my surprise, he showed up on time with a notebook and pen. I showed him how to track expenses, explained compound interest, and set him up with some basic financial literacy resources. The entire time he paid attention, asked thoughtful questions, and took notes, like an actual adult human being. As he was leaving, he paused at the door, looking uncomfortable but determined. "Your place is really nice. Way better than that moldy basement they were going to stick you in." "Thanks, I like it," I replied, still somewhat guarded. He shifted awkwardly. "I was a real asshole about the garage and a lot of other stuff. I didn't realize how much you were carrying for everyone." I hadn't expected an apology from him. Not ever, really. It caught me completely off guard. "Water under the bridge," I said, meaning it more than I expected to. "Mom and Dad really miss having you around," he added. "Not just for fixing stuff, they actually miss you." "I miss certain things too," I admitted. "Not the exploitation part, but the good parts of family." He nodded, understanding. "For what it's worth, I'm glad you stood up for yourself." Needed to happen. Now, 6 months after my dramatic exit, I can honestly say my scorched earth departure was the best thing I could have done. Not just for me, but for all of us. Mom and Dad are on a budget for the first time in their adult lives. They've started building an emergency fund that doesn't just exist on paper. Dad's become surprisingly handy around the house, tackling projects he would have immediately handed off to me in the past. Tommy's not just working, he's thriving with actual structure and expectations. He still games and streams occasionally, but as a hobby, not a delusional career plan. He's talking about taking classes at community college again, but with a realistic plan this time, not just vague aspirations. And me? I've started dating again after being too exhausted to maintain a relationship for years. I joined a rock climbing gym, something I'd always wanted to try but never had the time or energy for. I've expanded my client base and raised my rates. All the energy that used to go into propping up my family now goes into building my own life. I still maintain firm boundaries. I don't lend money. I don't drop everything to fix their problems. But the dynamic has completely transformed. We're slowly rebuilding a relationship based on mutual respect rather than exploitation. It's still a work in progress, but for the first time it feels like progress is actually happening. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for people is to stop enabling their worst behaviors. It's messy and painful, but if they're capable of growth at all, they might just thank you for it eventually. My family did. And I never saw that plot twist coming. Edit for those asking if I'll ever fully trust them again. Probably not 100%, but I'm cautiously optimistic. Trust is earned in drops and lost in buckets, as they say, and they're earning those drops back slowly.